Have you ever wondered why your life is turning out the way that it is? How much does it have to do with how you think, or how you feel, or the choices that you make? Well, quite frankly, it has everything to do with those things. I've been studying personal development for 52 years, and I've run across a model. 5 years ago, I ran across this with Dr. Paul H. Jenkins, psychologist, that put the model together. He also wrote this book called Pathological Positivity. The model is one of how the brain works. It explains very well, in my view, how the brain works and how we have opportunities to make better choices and how we can regulate our results, our outcome by our mental choices. Now, what needs to happen here is I'm going to go through this kind of as fast as I can, but you run it through your truth filters, see if it works for you. All right. For Dr. Paul Jenkins, just it's notable that I'm a certified pathological practitioner, positivity practitioner, excuse me, and master life coach. So I work with him, still do have for the past 5 years. So what we've got here is this line, what it is. That can be kind of annoying. It is what it is, but it represents a circumstance, an event in our lives. Things happen. Could be a car accident, could be cancer, could be failing a driver's test. There are so many things that happen in our lives. And before we look at them, evaluate them, judge them, and apply our emotions to them, um, we go into what is called the evaluation phase. We evaluate them. We evaluate things based on our past experiences. Sometimes we take into account experiences of others, but most of the time it's evaluation based on our past experiences. And what we'll do is we'll judge and we'll compare. For example, there is one aspect of the brain that's very interesting. It's called the amygdala, and it's a little, I think, almond size part of the brain that basically controls our fight or flight reactions. And when we look at things, sometimes it's initially shock and a little bit of fear and a little bit of, flight reaction. For example, a relative in my family had cancer. The initial reaction was one of fear. Okay. And so that's quite normal. So when we evaluate, we'll tend to evaluate things based on the concept or the comparison that, oh, this could be better. Okay. Well, certainly, what could be better than cancer? Not having cancer. Okay. At all. Being perfectly healthy. Now, when we do that, and even with a car accident or something like that, say one gets in a car accident, well, what could be better than a car accident? No car accident. Well, when we stay in that mode where we're always looking at life thinking that, gosh, everything should be better for me. Everything, the car accident, the illnesses, the grades in school, what happens at work, this should all be better for me. Well, it creates, unfortunately, or can create a victim mode of thinking. And we don't want that either. What we'd rather have is an agent mode of thinking where we're in control of our thoughts and our lives and choices and so on. Unfortunately, this red arrow represents feelings. You see, thought leads to feelings. Feelings come from thoughts. And if we dwell in this area and we stay in this area, it can lead to that victim mode of thinking. It can also lead to what Dr. Paul labels this as despair. Okay. And things that are a lot worse. All right. Now we have the choice to compare the event, the circumstance to, well, it could be worse. Okay. Let's go to the extreme. How about cancer? What could be worse than cancer? The relative passed away before we discovered the cancer. Well, there's one. Not having the doctor skills, the medical technology that we needed to take care of that cancer, well, that would have been another. we can come up with a whole list of things that would make the situation worse. All right, and that takes some thought. Okay, what could be worse than a car accident? Well, one being killed in a car accident, or one not having insurance, or somebody else being killed, or whatever the case may be. We can think of a lot of things that could be worse. The thing about it is, Viktor Frankl once put together a book, Man's Search for Meaning. Maybe you've read it, maybe you haven't. But the idea was that we as human beings have the ability to pause in our thinking and make a choice. You know, we can look at a situation and put ourselves into the worst of feelings, or we can look at the situation and make the best of it, which is what Viktor Frankl did, and it helped him survive 3 years of Nazi concentration camps. Now, what happens when we think in terms of, well, it could be worse? If you look at my example with the cancer, we had that happen in our family. It put us in the position where we looked at our situation, and she's still alive. We caught it early. We have some of the best doctors in the Western United States. We have insurance, we have money, we have strong family. Now, you might say, oh, this is just, a Pollyanna way of thinking and looking at life. No, it's not. We don't avoid the realities of life. In fact, true positivity looks at the realities of life and deals with them. In the example of the cancer, we were able to have a perspective that allowed us to manage working well with the medical teams, working well with insurance, and most importantly, lifting up the member of our family and helping them get through those terrible, terrible 14 doses of chemotherapy over 8 months, not to mention the 31 days of radiation. Okay, grueling to go with. So we're not grateful at all for the cancer, but everything else around, the difficult stuff, like an onion, we had to kind of pull it back and find out, oh, what's good about this situation? That helped us to show up for our relative stronger. And in the end, she was declared cancer-free, fortunately, and still is, knock on wood. So as human beings, we have the ability to choose, and this is what we need to do. We can ask ourselves, well, this could be better, and we could dwell there, or we can say, oh, this could be worse, and learn to manage the challenge with a little bit stronger perspective. So that's evaluation phase. Now, here's a trick, a mind hack, if you will. The gratitude power up. You see, gratitude is a way of looking at things and evaluating, things could be worse, and also strengthening our minds with the concept of gratitude. The gratitude power up is like this, 25-5, just think about that. For 5 days, each day, think about 25 new things that you're grateful for. Okay, but here's the trick. You can come up with 12 things that are easy. Your health, your family, your spouse, whatever the case may be, 12 things that you're easily grateful for. But here's the tough part. Gratitude is also often discounted because it typically doesn't involve heavy lifting, and therefore it doesn't work. But I'm going to ask you to do some heavy lifting. Dr. Paul Jenkins put this exercise together. Think of 13 things each day that are tough to be grateful for, kicking your trash. In the example of the cancer, well, that's hugely tough. What were we grateful for? Well, like I said, great medical staff, all the equipment, the money we needed. What about the pain of the chemo treatments? Well, they worked. There was pain, but she made it through and she got stronger. And it was amazing to see her character, how she would always be positive and uplifting in between those treatments. Okay. Was it difficult? Was it heart-wrenching? Sure. But gratitude power up, using that mind hack of gratitude really did help. So again, run this through your truth filters. After evaluation phase, we go into what is called creation mode. This is where we create our future. Now, evaluation phase, if you think about it, it could be better, it could be worse. How is that managed in our minds? Well, it's our imagination. We evaluate things based on what we imagine, what we experience, and so on. With creation, we're going to use imagination to the nth degree. Okay. And we could create a future that is worse than what is. Let's take the example of, well, let's stick with the cancer. If the family member hadn't chosen to move forward with courage, or possibly harm themselves, well, that creates a future that is worse. If they imagine themselves that they'll never be healed, they have no hope, well, they've created in their minds a future that is worse than what is. And this creates anxiety. If we could put the label up there, it feels negative. It's anxiety, it's worry. And worry is such a terrible use of imagination. On the other hand, we can create a future that is better. Okay, in the case of the cancer, we could look forward to, okay, we're going to go through 14, chemo treatments and 31 days of radiation. At the end of 9 months, could be cancer free. We'll see. The good news that in this relative's case, they were pronounced cancer free and have been so for the last year. And this is a great thing. Yeah, see, this is positive feelings. We've created in our minds, and this relative created in their mind, of course, a future of hope. And that brings strength. Okay. So we have a choice here in creation. We want to create an outcome, a future in our minds and move forward and create a situation that is worse or better. Okay. Husband and wife have a fight, for example. Let's say the husband chooses to go out and drink. Is that creating a better future? Probably not. If the husband chooses to say to the wife, hey, all right, let's go into counseling and see if we can save our marriage. Bit more positive, bit more hope, okay? Choices. As an example, twice a day, and this is Dr. Paul putting this together as well, twice a day, 8 o'clock comes. Do you think you could make a choice that would actually kind of mess up your life in the next, say, 15 minutes? Well, if you think about it, you could. Don't do it. But the idea is that if you can make a choice to do something that would ruin your life, you can make the opposite choice and do things that'll enrich your life, bring yourself joy and success and so on. And so the challenge here is by 8 o'clock tonight or tomorrow morning, do something that will enrich your life, make it better. What could you do? Does it have to do with exercise? Does it have to do with expressing love to somebody else? How about starting to write a book? Okay, how about watching a YouTube video that kind of helps you get a different perspective on life? And hopefully I'm doing that. Dr. Paul called this conveniently BB-8, which is kind of cute. You got to be a Star Wars fan to get that one. All right, so if we start off in the negative mode evaluation, it makes it easier for us to end up in the negative mode of creation. We don't want to do that, all right? We want to do, get in the positive mode with our feelings and our thoughts and create a future of hope. On the bottom left, when we're headed in that direction, we call that peace. Of course, we work toward something better in the future, and that's hope, which can ultimately bring joy. And that's a perspective. So what we've got here, Dr. Paul calls this is the vector. What's a vector? Well, this is the flight pattern you want to be in. When an airplane is flying, for example, from Seattle to Washington, D.C., over the United States, the towers will tell the plane, look, you're gonna want to follow vector Valhalla 123. Well, it's a flight vector that will bring them safely into Washington, D.C. Okay, in the proper flight path. So you want to get yourself in the best flight path you can. Remember, you've got evaluation phase, you've got creation phase, but most importantly, you have choices. And again, I challenge you to evaluate this according to your truth filters. Does it work? It can. It can work one time, but I'm telling you, if you practice this and get it in your head and learn to say for yourself, oh, it could be better, could be worse, it could be worse. And you start thinking about that. Okay, what can I do to make this better? I mean, you could even take a screenshot of this and put it up on your mirror in your bathroom or whatever. But learn to use this, get used to it, and you'll be a much stronger person, and you can create more hope in your life. That's it. Again, this was put together by Dr. Paul H. Jenkins. My name's Jeff Shoup, and I am proud to work with that gentleman. Enjoy your day.